5 friends go for a vacation.
Everybody ready? Let's get the show on the road!
To a remote cabin in the woods.
This is awesome.
But they quickly discover a deadly history involving murder.
The lambs have passed through the gate. They are come to the killing floor.
Together, they must fight to keep themselves from becoming the next victims of the cabin in the woods.
Joss Whedon is having a really big year this year, right? He's got The Avengers coming out. And then, of course, his latest film that's out now is called Cabin in the Woods. Liz, Sean, you've both just seen it.
I was so excited to review this film because I knew nothing about it, and I think that's how most audiences should go into this film. So I don't really want to provide any sort of plot summary because I think you should go in blind. Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard, who are the co-writers of this film, and Drew Goddard directed it, they put together this film as a criticism of the state of horror film today.
There is a certain critique, I would say, but just because you say it, you're using cliches. Just because you point out the fact that these are tired horror tropes, that in and of itself doesn't make those tropes fresh.
Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon specifically talked about how disappointed they were at the state of horror films, how they felt the characters were incredibly unlikable and just insipid, how story didn't matter anymore and plot didn't matter, and there's no purpose to watching these unlikable characters get slashed off one by one. These cliches are being used to point out that the state of horror film is decrepit.
By using the same stereotypes and cliches.
Yes, but it's using it in a strange fashion. These characters, our 5 main characters, do turn into horror cliches, but they pointedly become horror cliches.
Truth or dare?
Dana. There.
What the hell was that?
It's the cellar door.
Dana. I dare you.
So Scream makes a very pointed critique, if you will, of how things can become stagnant with using stereotypes.
Scream is a very good movie to point out because it understands its genre and is able to spin it into something new. It points out the cliches and the stereotypes and then turns them on their head. This movie points out the cliches and the stereotypes, and then all it does is basically say, by having acknowledgement of it, that in and of itself makes them new and fresh, and it doesn't.
That's not true. I mean, the point is, as filmmakers, if you disagree with the state of film, you make a new film as a response, and that's what this film was. It was pointing out the pitfalls and foibles of modern-day horror films, and the ending of this film, it reinforces what they're doing.
Well, I had a lot of questions about that ending. And yes, I don't want to go into what exactly happens in the end either, but when we get to the final outcome of this movie, it's pretty darn goofy. Everything that this has been leading up to, I just sort of sat there going, really? That's where we're headed?
You're so wrong.
I didn't know what it represented. When you finally see why it's happening and what it does, I was just left with more questions.
Is it a straight horror criticism?
It's not a parody. It's not Scary Movie.
It's not a spoof.
Right. Not a spoof. But another thing that doesn't make this movie work in calling it a horror comedy is that you have movies like The Howling or the Fright Night pictures or Scream that also operate well as a horror picture. They have a certain amount of tension from what's happening. This movie, I did not feel the thrills of it at all.
I do partly agree with you in the sense of that it's not a terrifying film. You sit there and you enjoy it, and once you get the central conceit of the film, it's less scary.
Do I have to be a Joss Whedon fan to enjoy this film?
I can't be a fan of anyone who wrote Alien Resurrection.
That was a long time ago.
Sorry.
Oh,
Sorry. Can't do it.
I think everyone should love this film.
People who understand Joss Whedon and know these actors that he's been using so far, but people who are unfamiliar with Joss Whedon and just go in knowing the tropes of horror movies, I don't think they're going to get that much out of it because they're just going to see things they've seen many, many times before. Maybe that will satisfy them.
Wow, you all are so far apart on this film, and I don't think we're going to close this gulf at all. So why don't you take your tickets and give us your final verdicts?
The Cabin in the Woods ultimately thinks it's far more clever than it actually is. Skip it.
The Cabin in the Woods is exactly as clever as it thinks it is. On opening night, you should see it.
Well, that is one ticket for The Cabin in the Woods, which is a Stream It. Cheers!
All right.